Kia ora everyone, and welcome back to this, the wonderful world of Humankind. Today I'm going to take you through 5 tips for advancing players. Now, these will still apply to beginners as well, don't get me wrong, but these are catered more towards players who are keen to up their game, to take it to the next level. I won't dwell too much on the most basic of details, but I will cover off any prior context that you might need to know quickly while I'm explaining each tip, and throughout there'll be a little bit of strategy laced through too. First and foremost, and my first tip is about free neutral tribes, these tribes here. Now, we've discussed them before, and we've covered that you can, down here with patronage, use influence and gold to slowly influence them and eventually bring them into your empire, not only getting rid of this off the map and stopping them from spawning units, but also giving you a free city. These cities, by the way, tend to be really good because the AI tends to develop their cities a little bit faster than you. However, the tip that I want to show you today involves this. So when the AI first spawn these city-states, or barbarian cities, they have 0 population. What do you do with a 0 pop city? Well, you walk straight in. Take a look, folks. I just absorbed my Banza Congo. My Banza Congo is what it is now. And if I turn on the district overview, you can see that even though it was a brand new city, it had a nice little farmer's quarter here for me. If I'd left it for a couple more turns, it would have had even more. These things grow like crazy, and they don't usually spawn with units within them. They tend to have some units somewhere, but often they'll send them out far and wide almost immediately. In fact, before the outpost is really even created, because the AI is a bit of a cheat. So there's a fun little tip for you to instantly pull cities within your empire. Now, if you're in the very early game and you haven't crossed over your city cap, then that's totally fine. You can keep the city. It's a great way for you to start earning influence from the very beginning, remembering that cities earn it and outposts don't. However, if like me, you're over your city cap, you're gonna start taking some serious hits. And aside from the fact that cities can build on these shared projects, so it is useful to have extra cities for that, you don't really want to stray too far over top of this cap. And actually, that brings me into my second tip, which is about cultural conversion and influence. But for starters, I think it's worth just talking about city caps a little bit more. You can see 1 city over the cap only penalizes you with 10 stability, but if you're 2 over, you take a massive hit, 100. More so even. And that can be devastating in the early game when you're not producing a whole lot. Even to me right now, it's around half of my influence per turn. One thing you can do, particularly on newly acquired cities, is move your unit on top of them and ransack them. It'll destroy the city, and then you can replace it with an outpost, if you're worried about that city cap. But more broadly, my second tip is actually about cultural conversion and influence per turn. So you may remember from my stability video, if you've watched it, that if you are in this maximum level of stability, settled, that's 91% or higher, you will earn, if I hover over this city, 2 influence per population. You can see Snakeway is earning 24 influence from its pop, that's 12 times 2. If it was lower than 90% though, it would only earn 1. So that's especially important in the early game, and I can't stress that enough. You need influence to expand, so make sure that your cities are above that 90% stability to maximize your influence. You might also want to choose cultures in the early game that can help you with influence. In this game, I chose Zhao, not Joe, in the early game and got their Confucian school, which is fantastic because it actually provides stability instead of taking it away, and their cultural bonus, that +2 stability from harmonious thought, that empire bonus, stays with me forever, so all of my districts will gain an extra 2 stability. Very, very useful because stability equals influence, and that's the key takeaway here. Why does that matter? Well, largely because, as we know, if these territories aren't under your control, firstly, you'll be earning a lot less influence from them, but secondly, you may suffer from cultural osmosis. This will force you to adopt another empire's civics, or take a huge stability hit, again, impacting on the amount of influence that you earn. Next up, I'd like to talk a little bit about era stars and when to change culture or change eras. Most players assume, like me, that you go in here, you look at your era stars, you think, okay, how many do I need to get to advance to the next era, and which ones can I get as quickly as possible so that I can fill up these stars and quickly race through. And that stands, and that is absolutely a viable strategy. Don't get me wrong, I think that racing to get a culture is a good idea. But sometimes we have to accept that we just won't get a choice. Particularly on higher difficulties, here I'm playing on Humankind, I'm not beating the AI to choose my culture in the first few eras, most of the time. Or maybe it's moreover that I just need to acknowledge that sometimes I don't need to absolutely advance to the next era straight away. Let me tell you why. Humankind is all about fame, not necessarily moving through eras. Now, yes, as you move through, you'll get stronger and stronger and have more opportunity to earn fame. But waiting around a few turns, particularly on slower speeds, may not be a bad idea. Here's why. Have a look at this. So in this case, I'm an A-Slate culture. So my A-Slate era stars are earning me 150 fame. Moreover, ones that I'm becoming more advanced in and earning more and more of are earning me 200 or even more than that. It may be worth sticking around in an era, particularly if you're gaining the extra bonus from your affinity. I'm an A-Slate culture, so I'm getting the A-Slate affinity bonus, but if I'm swapping through into a different culture next time, like a scientific one, then I won't receive it. So I might want to wait around, particularly if I'm close to getting some stars, not because I need the stars to reach this era goal, but because I want the fame. If you hover over on the left-hand side, you get a breakdown of all the players' fame, and you can see that actually hanging around and getting an extra 150, particularly if I was quite close to it, could be really worthwhile. We're around halfway through the game, and 150 fame is actually quite a lot. It would yeet me ahead of the next player at the very least. So do check your era stars before you move through into the next era, just in case you're close to getting something, particularly if it aligns well with your cultural affinity, and you may or may not have that goal or that cultural affinity moving forward. If you're also in a pinch for fame and you need just that little bit more, don't forget you can also click the competitive deeds tab over here, where you can scroll through and just find maybe some quick things that you might be close to doing or close to achieving that could net you a little bit of extra fame, right? So if I can spread my influence through my home continent, I can get 150 fame. That's like a whole nother era star, right? If I conquer it, even better, then I can do both of those. So there are lots of different things that you can do here to just quickly pick up some fame, and it can be really worthwhile. Some of them are first in, first served as well. Be the first to discover certain wonders. So it pays to keep these in mind when you're planning out your fame game. My fourth tip to advancing players involves when to connect territories, outposts. If you have a look at one of your cities, let's use Jerusalem here as an example. Currently, Jerusalem has no extra territories attached to it. You can see if I zoom out, you can see its solid city border stretches all the way around here where I'm tracking with my mouse. It's got nothing attached to it. Wales is its own city next door. There is, however, a territory right here next to it, and despite being about midway through the game, it's only going to cost me 43 influence to attach. As we know, if I do this, wabam, I can now build all sorts of extra districts in this territory, so I can get 2 unique districts here, one on the main city, and now one on the newly attached administrative centre, which has been upgraded from what it was previously considered, which was an outpost. However, come over here to Snake Way with me. Snake Way already has 2 territories attached. Look at the cost of the third, 1,483. Let's detach these other ones. You can see the second costs 691. Now it only has 1 territory attached. Let's detach Sham as well. And Sham only costs 43. My point here is that it scales rapidly. It really, really ramps up in cost. The same if you're doing it with gold. The strategy here then, or at least the best strategy I've found, is to take a city and attach 1 territory. Then build another city and attach 1 territory. Reaching your city cap and going over it by 1 is okay. You don't want to really be over it by any more than 1, and ideally you'd just be within the cap, but you can push it to be over by 1. But the strategy here, more importantly, is to make sure that you have a city to outpost ratio that is as even as you can possibly get it if you want to save on influence. Now, as you move through, 691 influence might not be much to you at all. If you've bought all of your civics and you just don't care, that's totally fine. But if you're trying to do it as cheaply and efficiently as possible, then try and stick to 1 or 2 to a city rather than going the megacity approach. The megacity approach, even if it seems logical on the map as to where your territories are laid out, is not a good idea when it comes to administering your cities, so I would highly recommend that you just go very carefully, city attached to an outpost, another city attached to an outpost, and so on. Finally, I'd like to take you through some advanced combat techniques. First and foremost, I would always recommend advanced players choose manual battle, wherever possible. Now, if you've heard me say that and you're thinking, that is ridiculous, bear with me because I have it out for you as well. In your deployment, you generally want to look out for flanks, so where could the enemy run around and get in behind me? I'm a little bit concerned that they could run around this way. I don't know what's there, so I'm keeping that in mind. And of course, I'm looking for high ground or forests to hide in from ranged attacks. Also, rivers to hide on the other side of, right? So I'm paying attention to my geography. I'm going to end my deployment. They've started theirs, and you can see that I am in a pretty advantageous spot here. Now, for the players who thought, oh, I can't be bothered manually resolving every battle, click this auto. You've seen it there before, but what the important thing to note here is that I think, from my testing, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it in the comments, but from my testing, if you click manual and then click auto, and literally just let the AI do everything, it will fight on average better. At the very least, because you have chosen where to put them. Okay? At the very least, because you've chosen where to put them, and maybe that even has flow-on effects throughout the rest of the battle. My next advanced combat tip is that you can move through friendly units without it costing you a movement point. So you can see here that this unit, this hoplite here, can move through the archer, and that's only one move. It's being triggered by this adjacency, so it can't move any further in one. There's its second, right? 1, 2, because this tile, the archer's tile, doesn't count. You can use that to chain through and move really, really far as well in the right conditions. Something to bear in mind if you need to quickly move your units around into a new position is that you can move through friendly units for free. You can just sort of osmose through them. Very powerful, and don't sleep on it. And as I've said in previous videos, defense can really be your best offense, particularly if you've got the high ground or you're in an advantageous position. But really, in any case, if you defend against the AI, you are much more likely for them to run in and do damage against you, and for you to take very little in return. You can see here I could strike an attack and do 15 to 30 damage, but in response, I would take somewhere between 11 and 25. So, what I could do instead is defend, fire with my archer, who's safe up on the high ground, and then, in the AI's turn, they will attack into me because they are fools. Lastly, just a couple of other little quick combat tips. Don't forget that when you are besieging cities, horses can't climb walls, so you're not going to be able to climb through districts, particularly these fortified garrisons, if you've got horses. You can't get over the city's walls with horses. You can walk over them with units, or siege units, but you can't simply just waltz your way through. Do bear that in mind when you're planning your battles. Now, other than that, everybody, that concludes this video for Humankind Tips and Tricks. Take a look at this juicy barbarian city that's spawned over here. It's already got 5 districts with 2 pop only inside of it. My units here, the 5 of them will easily be able to sweep this using my advanced combat strategies. We don't need to bother spending gold or influence to bribe or praise these people, folks. Using our advanced tips, we can steal them basically for free. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you hopefully in the next Humankind video or live stream. See everybody, and take care.